All right, everyone. I'd like to get started. So, I'd like to call the meeting to order, please. Thank you all for being here. Appreciate your time and, inputs. You should be looking at a revised, agenda, that was sent out. So if you're just looking at one that doesn't have revised on it, let us know so we can get you the right information. You want the copy? All right, so we have a quorum. Rick, you're on the seat. Hoover, you're on the seat in case we need a roll call or anything. So do I have a motion to approve the agenda the revised agenda as presented?
Yep, Dave Zelenak. So moved.
Okay. Welcome to those on board. Thank you. So Barb, and what's your first name again? Alan, I'm sorry. And Alan, thank you very much. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, agenda carries. Thank you. Any public comment for items not on the agenda? Anybody in the audience? Anybody online?
I just wanted to make sure that you guys are actually going over the South Powers extension. Is that happening?
Is that Rick is? Yes, we are.
Okay,
Later.
will I be able to ask questions at that time?
We will have a public comment period.
Okay, thank you.
All right. I don't hear any public comments, so we'll move on. Item 4, approval of the minutes. So do we have a nomination? What do I call it? Nomination? To approve the minutes for the March 6th meeting?
Yeah, Dave Zelenak. So moved.
Okay. Anybody second? Second, thank you. All those in favor say aye.
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 What about the approval of the minutes for the February 14th joint special meeting?
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I just had a typo. There was a typo in the minutes from the joint special meeting. I was listed as an at-large member. I'm actually representative of the CTAB. And I just wanted the minutes to show that.
Okay.
CTAB representation.
You got that, Rick?
Yes.
All right. So do I have a motion to approve the minutes of the February joint meeting as amended by Carlos?
Larry Tobias, so moved.
Have a second?
Very good. Second.
Thank you, Craig. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Thank you very much. All right. Number 5, financials. Lisa
Corey, Finance Manager for the PPRTA. The financials that are in this packet is the first for 2024. So we're reporting all the sales and use tax collected in January, and we're off to a great start. We collected above budget by $538,749, or 5.1% above budget. If we look at January of 24 compared to January of 23, we also exceeded that. So we collected $243,380 more, and that is 2.1%.
All right. Any questions for Lisa on the financials? Good report. Glad to know we're starting off ahead of projection. That's always good.
Yep.
All right. Item 6, 24 capital maintenance public transportation projects. See of Colorado Springs. Gail, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the CAB, Gail Sturtevant with the City of Colorado Springs. Today, the city has 9 contracts for your consideration. The first one is for the Black Forest Road widening, specifically for construction management services. This project is an A-list project. There is a map included showing you the project location. Construction management services are provided by Basis Partners. When we selected Basis Partners, we went through an RFP process. There were 5 respondents and they were selected. Also, when we did the original contract for them, we had a shorter construction time duration than it's actually going to be taking to be able to complete the services. And we've added the Cottonwood Creek tributary work that was triggered by the project. So we are asking for a construction contract amendment in the amount of $458,960 for Basis Partners. Second contract is for the I-25 ramps for South Nevada Avenue, South Tejon Street corridor improvements. This is also an A-list project, and the map again is provided for your information. As you recall, a few months ago, we went through an RFP process to select a CMCG or construction manager, general contractor, construction contractor, and that was SEMA. This would be the third task order or modification to this contract for them. When we first contracted with them, we brought them on board to help with design services. And then we gave them a contract to order long lead items. This is actually for the construction work they'll be performing on that corridor. The price for this work is $6,787,871.74. The cities, the third and fourth contract is, I just want to give you a reminder, if you recall, last month we did a line item transfer to the city's traffic program for roadway safety and traffic operations and $10 million. These are, the next two are going to be 2 of the 3 contracts we anticipate using that money for. The first one, contract number 3 is for the Mark Shuffle Road improvements. We do have a map included. This would be funded underneath that roadway safety and traffic operations program to continue construction services with Kramer North America on the Mark Shuffle Road corridor. What they've been working on have been the northbound lanes and the box culvert, the Texas crossing there north of North Carefree and the All the Barns intersection. This will allow us to do the southbound lanes from North Carefree up to Tamlin and position us well to keep moving north in 2025 at the next construction contract.
Gail, quick question. Did you mention, did I remember correctly that the contractor that's developing that area there just south of Barnes to the east of Mark Shuffle, did you say that they were contributing or doing work in that area as well, or paying for part of it?
In this case, they are not paying specifically directly to Mark Shuffle, but they are, the contractors that the developers to the east have the design plans and getting ready to start construction in the not too distant future on Barnes. So it's important for us to get that Barnes intersection lowered. As you recall, that's almost 8 feet lowering in some areas in that location. So that needs to be set so they can tie in appropriately and have that continue on to the east that will connect at Banning Lewis Parkway.
Okay, thank you.
All right, the city's fourth contract is for the Devon Boulevard improvements. This is going to be for design services. As we discussed last month, because we feel like continuing with the Mark Shuffle Road north and including the Dublin piece between Peterson Road and Mark Shuffle and including that as a future phase of the Mark Shuffle Road project, it was important for us to get the engineering up to the point where we can start engaging our construction or CMCG contractor. So this is an engineering contract to get that design advanced at 60% level and start engaging with Kramer North America on that. This is for a contract with Basis Partners in the amount of $497,665. And there is a map included in your packet for that as well. The city's fifth contract is actually a construction contract for 3 trail crossings at Dublin Boulevard, at the Rock Island Trail at Murray Avenue and Shooks Run Trail at Uinta Avenue. This is a project that's partially funded through the state, through MMOF, which is the Multimodal and Mitigation Option Fund program that the state offers. In addition with, that's 50% of the cost and the other 50% it comes from the PPRTA on-street bike program. The total contract amount. This is going to be for construction services. We did go through an invitation for bid process. We had 7 bids. Finsterwald Irrigation and Landscaping Company was the low bid. And the total contract amount of $697,381.44. And again, the PPRTA portion of that is just 50%. And there is a map included in your background that shows where those locations are going to be.
Mr. Chair,
Go ahead.
question about that? Should I hold my questions to the end or right now?
Go ahead now, Carlos.
Yeah, actually, it's a comment and a question. The number one, the one at Dublin. Went back through my notes and I had reported that crossing there on Dublin for the Cottonwood Creek Trail about 5 years ago that we needed that. And there's a sign there that says cross at the signal. And if you look down Dublin, you can't even see the signal. That's how far away it is, you know. So I'm glad to actually see that. That was my comment. My second question, or my question had to do with, is this design also going to include pedestrian refuges, or is it just crosswalks across these intersections or these mid-block crossings?
I'm going to phone a friend on that. I would assume that there's midpoint refuge islands. Because it's really designed for the bikes, but I would have to, I don't know that for sure, Carlos, whether or not they were there.
All right, thank you.
And I do want to ask you a follow-up question. You mentioned Cottonwood Creek. Are you thinking where Cottonwood Creek goes underneath Union versus Dublin? Because I actually wondering if you're thinking about this in the correct location, and maybe we should talk about it offline.
Yeah, it's not on, you can't see it on the map here, but Dublin Boulevard is south of the Cottonwood Creek Trail system, and there's a feeder trail that goes up from Cottonwood Creek. It comes up, and it's just a short segment, maybe about a quarter of a mile. And then it ends right there at Dublin. And so this would actually feed into the Cottonwood Creek system there to get into, if this is Dublin Park. This particular map, it was kind of hard to read. It did have the addresses or locations, and it has all 3 here. But I believe this is, if you see there at the very top of the map, that's that particular not the intersection, but where the trail intersects with the street there at Dublin Boulevard. Again, it's just very difficult. This map was I just had to have knowledge of where this was located. But Cottonwood Creek would just be right to the north, about a quarter of a mile.
Right, no, I understand that. I'm used to riding the Cottonwood Creek Trail, and I know when I get to Union, just near that area, I have to go to the signal at Woodman Hills to cross versus.
Keep going west. If you keep going west, there's some little drainages there, and it will actually show there's a new subdivision, and then you just turn kind of south.
I tell you what, Carlos, I would
Yeah.
ask you to speak with Ryan Phipps afterwards and just to kind of get a better idea of exactly where this is located. And if you've got concerns at another location, you can share that with him. Because I know we have some others in the works. And he may be able to answer that a little bit better.
Yeah, and my question is, again, the pedestrian refuges there, or some sort of median, or some sort of way to provide
He will-
traffic calming and a little
he will
safer to cross there.
Also be able to answer that for you.
Okay, thank you.
Dave, you got your hand up?
Well, I do, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much. And Gail, as always, great job. Always endlessly fascinating presentations. The question I had for you is about the Shooks Run Trail on Uinta Street. Help us understand. I know for those of us who do drive Uinta Street, it's probably the most, I don't know, it's one of the highest, I'm not sure if congested is the word for it, but it's, as many of you know, during the peak hours, it's not bumper to bumper, but it's a constant stream of cars back and forth. I would hope that the design would not restrict any of the through traffic on Uinta, causing backup safety issues. Can you just maybe give us a 30-second overview of what the new features would look like, and hopefully maintaining the capacity on Uinta Street for that heavy traffic volume?
So Dave, I will have to tell you, neither Ryan or I, who's in the room with me, can give you a lot of the specifics on the detail, but I would not anticipate having any changes to the traffic capacity in that location.
Good answer.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, Uinta, as you know, Uinta is gets fairly narrow right in that location. So we know we've had a lot of discussions about that. So I know that the number of lanes and the throughput is not different.
Yeah, that's great. I just hate to see congestion, of course, impacting negatively both traffic safety and pedestrian bike safety as it is now. So any improvements I think would be good, as long as they maintain the throughput. So thank you very much, Gail. As always, good job.
Thank you, Dave. Appreciate it. All right, I'm going to move on to the City 6 contract. It's for Galley Road over the West Fork of Sand Creek, near the Wooten Road intersection for a bridge rehabilitation. There is a map located in there because I know we've been doing a lot of work in this area on bridges, just in general. This particular bridge had an inspection done in 2022 and it identified some need for some bridge maintenance activities. We went out there to start going and doing those, which were more routine bridge maintenance and activities, and recognized that the deck was in much poorer shape than the report had indicated. So I took a step back and we're actually doing some more detailed engineering for the deck replacement. And this actually gave us an opportunity, since it's more heavy duty maintenance activities, that we're actually going to be adding sidewalks on that bridge as well at the same time. So this actually gave us an opportunity. This is to address that issue in the area as well. This is for the engineering services. This is with Basis Partners in the amount of $394,075.10. The city's 7th contract is for the dig out and patch program. The city went through an RFP process in 2022 and put an on-call contract in place with 2 companies. One of those 2 companies is Elite Surface Infrastructure. This year we are looking to fund Elite in the amount of $250,000, or up to $250,000, to be able to provide that service. And if you recall, we've mentioned this before, if you actually have a wide crack, or if you have an area that's starting to slump down, that they can go in and cut that out, build that back up, and pay that over in advance of doing a more significant roadway maintenance. City's 8th contract is for roadway and airfield paint. The city went through an RFP process earlier this year. We had 2 respondents. The city has selected Diamond Vogel to be able to provide this paint material. Underneath this contract, the city could use PPRTA money or other funding sources, such as funding from the airport enterprise, to go and purchase materials underneath this. For PPRTA, we anticipate having the up to $500,000 for this. So don't be alarmed when you see the airfield. We're not in that business, but it is part of our over citywide contract. And the last contract is also more of a citywide contract, is for on-call landscaping revegetation services. The city went through an RFP process where the PPRTA team and the Stormwater Enterprise team put an RFP together because we recognized we had this need on occasion. We did receive 6 proposals. We selected 5 contractors to put on-call contracts in place to provide these services. And you can see the 5 contracts listed in the memo. There is currently no dollars assigned to this, and it could be used for both capital needs and maintenance needs as they would arise. And we'd be contracted with available budget in 2024. Any questions on any of these 9 contracts that I've presented today?
Mr. Chair, a question here. Returning back to the dig out and patch, I had noted this, that you said there were 2 companies, and you may have just mentioned this here, but there were 2 companies where we're providing a contract to Elite Surface. Who was the other contractor, or is that going to be coming later? And maybe I missed it.
I did not say it because it wasn't relevant to this memo, and I don't recall off the top of my head who it is right now, Carlos, but we do have a contract with them. We've just not issued any money that would need to come to the board for approval.
For the second company?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
All right, any other questions for Gail on the city's 9 contracts? Seeing none online, do I have a motion to approve the city's request as presented?
Yep. So moved. David?
Thank you, David.
Second, Ed Jones.
Barb, thank you. Second, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. Thanks, Gail.
Thank you.
Josh, you get a break this month. Yay. All right, we'll move on to item 7A, transit services. Ms. Land.
Good afternoon, Land Rail Transit Services Division Manager. In your packet is our monthly transit report. I would like to highlight the table with year-to-date information. In this table, you might notice for ADA paratransit boardings per hour, which is all the way to the right, 1.8. So you will notice that's a measure that we use to track performance, and that number has decreased slightly from year-to-date January, February in 2023 compared to the first 2 months in 2024. We have been monitoring that information. One of the reasons causing that decrease could be because of the vehicle shortage situation. We're moving vehicles from paratransit to fixed route and also giving some minivans to our paratransit contractors to operate. So during this transition, we're monitoring the situation. We are getting a lot of positive feedback from customers, but also some concerns. The number of complaints over cutaway vehicles versus minivans are comparable. And if we break the numbers further down, the February efficiency actually went up slightly compared to same time last year. So I just want to point that information out to you. We are monitoring the information, those changes, and also looking into maybe a test environment for us to play around and match the passenger's disability with the right type of vehicles automatically instead of manually. So those are some of the changes that we're implementing reflected in the report that you see. Also in our monthly report, you will see under transit highlight, item number 1, National Transit Driver Appreciation Day. March 18th is the National Transit Driver Appreciation Day. We from Mountain Metro, we went to our transit driver operating facilities and also went to downtown terminal, handing out candies and small items to show our appreciation to our drivers. So if you happen to see a driver ride the bus, a little appreciation goes a long way. Also in your packet is our proposed spring service change for 2024. We are extending Route 18, which is the route starting close to Boulder and Union, running up and down North Union to Montebello. The performance on that route or ridership per hour has been pretty low. We started the service in fall 2018. However, we did go through the COVID period. In 2023, the numbers are still relatively low. So we're proposing to extend the south end of this route further south to connect to Route 1 and 7 across from Memorial Park, hopefully to provide better connection to other transit services along that route. Normally, we look at how frequent the service is and how wide the coverage of the route and also the budget. So you work within those 3 defined measurements. And in this case, we're trying to keep the budget the same. We're trying to keep the coverage slightly longer, cover a little more area. Therefore, the frequency will decrease from 45 minutes to 60 minutes. So that's one proposed change we're making. The second one in your packet is we're adding 2 bus stops on Route 38, which is a deviated fixed route, also a slightly low performing route. We actually are responding to some customer requests to add stops, hopefully to better use the service. We're also proposing to eliminate 2 additional hours on Independence Day. This was the service that we proposed to add last year, but we were never able to make it happen. In talking to our contractors, the challenge is those are the 2 additional hours outside our normal operating hours. Even without the driver shortage situation, it is difficult to staff for the contractor for those additional hours, just 1 day out of the whole year without permanent workforce. If we were to do that, we would be looking at negative service impact on the following day. So we're proposing to eliminate those 2 hours that we were never able to make it happen last year. So the public will not see a change in the Independence Day. So those are the highlights in our transit report. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Good report, Lan. Any questions for Lan on transit? Anybody online? All right, seeing none. Thank you so much, Lan. As usual, you're on top of stuff, and that's good. All right, Colorado Springs monthly change order report and property acquisition. It's in your packet. It's an information only. Any questions for Gail on any of her log? Not seeing anybody online. Okay. City of Colorado Springs Powers North reimbursement update.
Mr. Chair, Gail Sturdivant, the memorandum, just giving an update on where we are as far as occurring costs on the Powers Boulevard construction and the future reimbursement. With the statements that were provided since our last meeting, there has been an additional $2,055,781.05 occurred that are eligible for PPRTA reimbursement in the future. And that brings the total up to just over $2.5 million. Any questions related to this or the overall memos provided for your information?
Larry?
Actually, this is a question from both Jim and myself to Gail. Is what type of construction oversight is there on this particular project?
Yeah.
I know CDOT, when they did, when Copper Ridge did the interstate extension, the CDOT had construction oversight over the project there. What type of contract?
Yeah. Let me provide some clarification. CDOT did not have construction oversight. They had construction acceptance at the end. Construction oversight was provided by Felsbrook, Holt, and Oliveg, or FHU. For this particular interchange, FHU is also providing construction oversight. They're contracted by the Metro District, very similar to what they did on the interchange. I will tell you that one thing that's different, I think, and Rich unfortunately may be able to answer some of those if you have specific questions. The city is actually assigned a project manager too and goes to the meetings with them on a weekly basis, and they're available on site just to make sure in the end we're going to get what's going to be acceptable to the city, because the bridge construction will actually be city infrastructure in the future, because Powers will go underneath Voyager. Whereas the interchange, it became a CDOT asset after it was constructed.
Oh, so the interchange is actually a CDOT access and won't be part of the city or county.
Yeah, the one that was previously constructed off I-25 is a CDOT asset. The one being done at Voyager, the interchange, the Powers going underneath Voyager, and the ramps will be CDOT assets. The bridge that's going to carry Voyager over Powers Boulevard would be a city asset in the future.
Okay, that brings up a question at that particular intersection. Who will be responsible for maintenance and snow plowing?
We have IGAs in place for that already.
Okay.
We actually do, operation and maintenance agreements. In fact, that one's already done. We've had that in place. We just did an updated amendment for this particular work that's under construction right now. So it's very clear who does what. And then in areas where we provide mutual aid to each other when it makes more sense for the most efficiency.
You got any more? All right, thank you, Gail.
Thank you.
So we hold Steve Murray responsible.
It is, yeah, well, it's at least this company. I don't know if we can
No,
really blame Steve.
I'm just picking on Steve.
I'll take full responsibility.
All right. Thank you for that update, Gail.
Welcome.
El Paso County letter. Rick.
Wanting to speak to the Powers North item or the South Powers item?
The South Powers item.
Okay, so item 7D, El Paso County letter of support to South Powers extension. Scott, are you gonna?
I'll quickly introduce. So we have Scott Asher here. He's the project manager on this effort. So he'll give just a quick presentation to kind of explain what we're requesting here. the county and the project in general is requesting letters of support from all the vested local agencies. We already have a letter of support from the county's Board of County Commissioners. We're looking for a letter of support for the planning and environmental leakage study. So this is just the planning study for the extension of South Powers, and Scott will go over into more details. This is a PPRTA 3 joint A-list project for design and property acquisition, but the letter of support is just for the effort at the planning side of this RTA 2 A-list project. And Scott will explain a little bit more about what we've done here and what we're looking for.
Welcome, Scott.
Thank you. Scott Asher with Wilson and Company. As Josh mentioned, I'm the project manager for the consulting team working with El Paso County. Also in conjunction with the City of Fountain, CDOT, PPACG, and City of Colorado Springs and FHWA have all been partnered and involved in the process as we move forward. So a quick overview, just some of the project history again. It's a compilation of all the agencies in the region that have been working toward this project for a lot of years, actually. We're looking at the extension of South Powers from Mesa Ridge Parkway down to a connection with I-25, which has been planned for quite some time. This here just sort of shows the corridor history of Powers and the Powers Boulevard corridor as a whole, starting back in the mid-1960s and the visioning of having a beltway around the east side of the metro area has continued to move forward with implementation over the past 60 years. In 2000 there was a feasibility study for the extension of South Powers, so that was about 20 years ago, a little over 20 years ago, and this PEL is sort of taking up what was done from that initial planning, reassessing and providing recommendations as we move forward for the long-term planning of the corridor. So the PEL process started with a reason and visioning stage, going through existing conditions, really assessing what the existing conditions are for the corridor, ultimately developing a purpose and need for the project, going through alternatives, and now creating a PEL report that creates that summary of what the recommendations are as we move forward. I would like to note with the PEL process, it's a pre-NEPA process, which is National Environmental Policy Act, with NEPA being the actual federal action and decision document. This study is prior to that, but would feed into that ultimately. From a schedule standpoint, the project started in early 2022, and we've had a lot of coordination with stakeholders as well as community members. We've had a public open house, both in person and virtual, back in May of 2022. And we just closed in February this year, the public open house that we had presenting the recommendations of the study. So purpose and need, really the purpose and need provides a justification for what the project is for, why we're doing the project, and is sort of the basis for all the follow-on, I guess, environmental permitting through FHWA, which is the Federal Highway Administration. So we need to figure out what is the need for the project, determine that, develop that statement, as well as what some of the goals are from the agencies, stakeholders, and community members. So this is sort of an important piece of it. So the purpose of the study is to recommend an alignment to extend South Powers Boulevard from Colorado 16 Mesa Ridge Parkway to a connection with the Interstate I-25. South of Colorado Springs and Fountain, Colorado. This new corridor aims to enhance regional mobility and integrate future multimodal opportunities. The study will define the phasing and next steps for implementing the Powers Boulevard to the south. So that was the purpose and need that was developed, or the purpose that was developed for the project, with the need of the project being advancing the local and regional mobility in the area and incorporating multimodal opportunities throughout the corridor. So the purpose and need went through a review process with FHWA to get approval, as well as coordination point 2 in the PEL process. As we look at some of the planning context, one of the drivers of really picking this project up at this stage and looking at the corridor is a lot of the different things and the planning that's been going on for the project as a whole in the, over the past several decades, as well as current development pressures that are happening, that we want to make sure that we get the corridor defined to make sure that it doesn't get eliminated or doesn't get precluded due to development happening where the corridor should be. That happened in some of the previous recommendations from the previous study, where some of the development happened and started changing things of what was necessary. So we looked at the county's master plan, the Fountain Transportation Master Plan, Connect COS, as well as the PPACG 2045 regional plan. It was a big piece of that. One thing that I like to, it's worth bringing up too, is that Powers Boulevard, all the way from the north down to the south connection, is been identified as part of both the national highway system, as well as part of the STRAYNET, which is that strategic access highway network for the military. So it is an important piece of our transportation network. When you look at the land use planning in the area, again, this is where we looked at Plan COS, the El Paso County Master Plan, and Fountain Comprehensive Development Plan. So in those areas of what do they see coming, what sort of is happening. And from that also is coming out of that master plan, it sort of shows the fringes around the metro Colorado Springs areas being sort of the areas of potential growth in the future. And as well as down south in the south of Fountain. So there's several developments that are in this corridor in this area that are in different stages of planning and design and entitlement process. And through that, we want to make sure that we define what that corridor is, so that as those developments occur, they actually plan for the Powers Boulevard extension. We also looked at a lot of the environmental resources in the corridor as part of this analysis process to see if there's any major environmental resources that and what those potential impacts would be with the corridor as we move through that process. There's a lot of bike facilities, there's a lot of pedestrian facilities that are planned ultimately in some of these long range plans. The county's Park Master Plan and Trails Plan, as well as the City of Fountain, has a lot of trail connections that we want to look and see how does that also play in with the corridor as this moves forward. So as we move through its purpose and need, sort of that next step is really that alternatives development and analysis process. And so we went through a lot of different things, right? So developing the alignment alternatives, we looked at a lot of the previous alignments, right? From the previous study that was done in 2000, there was about 12 alignments and alternatives that were considered there. We dusted those off just to see if anything's changed in those. Also with that recommendation, with that, like I said, with existing conditions, we looked at what's changed from what was done in, back in 2000. In 20 years, a lot has changed on the south end of the town and around the Fountain area. So we needed to sort of account for that as well. We went through a process of looking at previous alignments of what made sense and what didn't, work through that, and then also identified several new alignments to consider as we move forward to avoid some of the challenges that appeared over the last 20 years. So with that, we went through a screening process, an alternative screening process, which level 1 screening is basically checking at the purpose and need, making sure the alternatives, then the corridors meet the purpose and need. If it doesn't meet purpose and need, it gets put to the side and gets eliminated. We then took a level 2 corridor analysis, where then we went through the detailed evaluation criteria on those alternatives to come down to what a recommended alignment would be. And then the level 3 was developing what is the typical corridor section width need to look like as we move forward here. Ultimately coming up with a recommendation for the project. So some of the things that I thought was worth noting is that with the typical sections, especially, we're looking at things that we could making the corridor more than just a road corridor. Looking at it as how can we maximize the space in the corridor footprint to look at multimodal uses, other uses, utility corridors, you know, manage lanes, all those sorts of different things that could go into this corridor to make sure we preserve a wide enough corridor and not minimize it so much that we can't handle additional elements. So with that, the recommendations through the study came up with a two-phased approach of recommendations. What we have in these alternatives, we were calling them alternative E3 and H3, with E3 basically being the connection from Mesa Ridge Parkway, coming through, crossing Mark Shuffle, crossing Squirrel Creek, following sort of the similar alignment. You know, it's been modified and refined some to miss properties and coordinate with some of the environmental impacts through this northern area, and it's been pretty similar to what was done back in 2001. As it comes south, this initial connection would come south and tie into a new interchange at I-25 north of the Martin Drake, or not Martin Drake, the power plant, Ray Nixon power plant here, basically in the general vicinity of where the Fountain Rail Park is looking and proposing to go, as we've, you know, looked at that connection being a multimodal sort of facility connection from that proposed development up to the airport and in the transit and the roadway networks. So that's sort of what our first phase of this project would look like. With a longer term phase looking out, you know, 30, 40 years, having the corridor extend south to a new interchange or modified interchange at just south of the Pikes Peak International Raceway. This is as a long-term corridor preservation look, as we, you know, assume or are planning that the region is going to continue to grow. If the region continues to grow, that will sort of drive the need as well for that additional extension. The overall corridor width that we're looking at is a 330-foot corridor for E, and then a 380-foot corridor with for both roadway, as well as it includes, you know, the ditches, as well as additional space on the outside for trail facilities, utility corridors, you know, potentially different frontage road systems, things like that on the outside of the overall footprint. So as we continue to move forward with that, we went through and identified sort of the phasing plan of how we sort of see the project phasing. And so we can start also identifying funding sources for different projects, with, you know, sort of the big apples being, you know, the Mesa Ridge and Powers interchange up here, making that connection and you know, maybe looking at building that interchange as a first step there, as well as developing the interchange at I-25 for the connection on I-25 out in my post 125, 126 area, being sort of the first phase of the project, and then really implementing sort of from north to south in general as it comes through, as the development is occurring in these areas, with sort of that last piece being the piece south of Cane Ranch area here, going in time back to I-25. With then the longer term piece of that would be the extension for H3 going all the way through to I-25, which again would be longer term, you know, 30 plus years out is what we would be anticipating. With the goal, ideally, with funding, you know, if we can find the funding and get grant money and figure out ways to do this, you know, getting this initial phase one implemented in the next, ideally 25 years. So some of the things from a public engagement, you know, we spent a lot of time over the life of the project trying to reach out and make sure people are aware of the project, talking with folks. We sent just for this last public meeting that we had just here at the beginning of the year, we sent out 200 certified letters to property owners in the area of the corridor to try and make sure that they knew what was going on. We had 74 of the property owners contacted the team. We met one-on-one with 45 property owners in the corridor. We had met with small group HOA down on the south end as well, along Old Pueblo Road. Had a stakeholder virtual meeting, which had incorporated the military bases and incorporated major employers in the area as well, with the stakeholders, and had a good participation in that. And then again, the virtual open house that we had through late January and through early February for the project. And now we're here. All the information that's been presented here is also on the project website as well, on the southpowerstudy.com. So I encourage you to visit that and look at it as well. We also have a large scale map that shows the two corridors on top of aerial, which is a lot more detail. It's hard to show an 11-mile corridor on a very small screen. So one of the things that we've done since the, a meeting with a lot of the property owners and the public, hearing some of the comments, we've actually refined the alignment some to address a lot of comments and a lot of concerns that were had with the original sort of corridors. And so that's sort of what we've put in what we call the post recommendation alignment refinements, where we've made some tweaks to the alignments to try and avoid critical areas that were brought up during a lot of those one-on-one meetings. Avoid as much impact to residential and property as possible, especially with this connection for E1 for the first phase, as well as trying to minimize impacts as we went through the Hannah Ranches as we go through here to try to follow the power line corridors and things like that to try and minimize what impact we had to the ranch land that's in this area. So we did a lot of refinements to try and to the recommendation to try and minimize and address comments that we heard through a lot of those conversations. Next steps really is finishing the PEL document right now. I'm getting that submitted to FHWA for review and approval. Again, since it is a study, this is just a study recommendation. It's not a decision document by FHWA. That won't happen until we moved into actually the environmental clearance processes for any projects that would actually move forward. We'll then be starting to identify money and funding for construction projects that make sense and seeing what money we can find as we go forward, or they're working with the county on that. And then ultimately design and, property acquisition and design, and then construction to try and get something completed within this corridor in the next, like I said, 20, 25 years and longer for the full buildup. So upcoming public hearing process. So we're here today talking with you all to keep you all apprised of what's going on with the study. We'll be meeting with City Council for City of Fountain next Tuesday evening to present these recommendations. Again, also coming back next week to present to the PPACG Board of Directors as well as the PPRTA Board, asking for their support. And then ultimately going to El Paso County Planning Commission in May of this year for final approval and adoption of the plan. So, and I know we've been trying to keep the public informed of these as well. So we pushed, once we got this schedule done, we pushed this out in these newsletters so the public is aware and can also come to these venues to provide comment as well as we move forward. Questions?
I have questions, of course.
Can you wait, Liz?
If you met me,
yeah.
you know. Okay, so how many people?
I apologize, but we haven't reached the public comment portion of this presentation yet.
Yeah, can you just hold on just 1 second, please?
Will do.
Any members of the committee have any questions for Josh or the presentation for Scott? Carlos?
Yeah, this is Carlos Perez with the Colorado Springs CTAB. Just a clarification, when it came to is it a single alternative that's being proposed or two alternatives? Is it E3 and what is it, H, E and H?
Yes.
Is it an and or is it an or?
It's an and.
So both alignments are being proposed as a single alternative. The letter wasn't very clear. It referenced it in the plural, and I was looking for multiple alternatives, but there's really, the letter, when it says alternatives, we're really talking about one, which is both E and H together.
Yes, yes, the recommendation is to actually, it's a phased approach with the initial being E and the long term being H3.
All right, thank you.
Any other, Brandy?
Comments and questions? Feels like we all need to get closer to our microphones today. Huge thank you to El Paso County. You guys took this on. You guys are willing to run with it. You guys are willing to be the stewards of this. And I know that this is absolutely needed. You can look at the timeline and see we're 60 years into this. It takes time, effort, and energy to get things to this point. And one of the reasons this came about is because as development was happening in the city of Fountain, we didn't have an alignment we could present to the developers to say, this is where South Powers was coming through. So I appreciate the county really taking the lead and taking the heavy lift. Scott with Wilson and Company leading this effort, even though I bailed on him and left the city of Fountain. So sorry about that. Two quick things. Does FHWA have to approve the alignment? Is that going to be part of this process?
That's a good question. So the alternatives analysis, which is coordination point 3, I neglected to mention that went through a process, and they've approved the alternatives analysis memo as well as what then becomes the recommendation. What they will approve, it's really they approved or accept the PEL document. It's a non-binding document at this stage, right? It is a planning level document, not a decision document. So they will approve the process and the PEL study as long as we've laid everything out and they checks all the boxes for them.
So from there, would it go to NEPA?
From there, it'll go to NEPA as we start to identify actual projects that would go into the NEPA process. So we'd have to have funding to go into NEPA, right? Because we have to have a funding source for a project to get a decision through FHWA. So if there's money for certain aspects of it, we can go through a process for certain aspects of it. If it's just a small piece of, let's say we're just doing an interchange, we'll go through the NEPA on the interchange at I-25 or Mesa Ridge.
Okay.
But each project would have to go through a NEPA process to be able to be approved by FHWA.
But FHWA, when they essentially, we'll call it bless the PEL, has said you're in the ballpark.
Mm-hmm.
So we wouldn't necessarily have to go through a larger exercise to approve those individual pieces once funding is available and we get through NEPA.
Yes. So that's what the beauty of the PEL is we've developed purpose and need. We've developed the alternatives for the corridor pieces. Right. So that piece stands and will carry through the follow-on NEPA elements.
So not to put you and Rich on the spot, but does CDOT have a role in that? And I know you're not a CDOT, but you're former CDOT. Because one of the things that I was told throughout the process was we're not going to be involved until later. So as long as FHWA is okay, we can start essentially working this thing through and getting NEPA and getting it built. And then eventually CDOT will come to the table. Rich?
I really can't speak specifically for CDOT, but I can just talk about, my experience in working on this project. And the vision was, I think originally that CDOT would eventually take over this road when it's fully developed and ready to go. So, CDOT would want to be involved at that point. And also they have a critical element in terms of the interchanges and access to the interstate and the 1601 process. So those are really the critical elements, I think, for CDOT. I don't know, Scott, if you want to add anything else.
Yeah, and the other thing I want to make sure we point out is that CDOT was a partner throughout the process, right? So yes, they have a role as it continues to move forward. And as Rich noted, especially at the connection points, they have a very critical role and be part of, because they'll have the approval process for the 1601. And you know, they're, in order for them to want to take it over, they're going to want to be involved in the process and the design and make sure everything's following their sort of standard to be able to take over a roadway in the future.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was asking, make sure they were staying involved
Yes.
throughout the process. And then last but not least, one of the overlays with this was that resiliency. And I didn't necessarily see it in the presentation. I don't need to put you on the spot, but maybe offline. I know that we were trying to make sure that they came to the table and we got special funding for that, so that maybe before it goes to the board, you can convey what was done to really make sure that this alignment was in everyone's best interest. And they went through that exercise to really put it in a space that met those resiliency requirements.
Yes, and you're right that we did. It was a pilot project with the CDOT resiliency group out of headquarters. So they went through and provided input on the alternatives, and as well as through the evaluations of, and going through the evaluation matrix of with the alternatives to provide us guidance on the resiliency piece. Probably the biggest point of resiliency for this corridor is the redundancy to I-25. We have that stretch of I-25 really between PPIR and, you know, the Pueblo County line up to Mesa Ridge is one of the most critical links in the network that has considerable safety issues and concerns. So having that resiliency for a corridor around is one of the big elements of that.
That's it. Thanks, Jim.
Okay. Just 1 second. I meant to tell you guys this at the beginning. I gotta go. I've got to go with my wife to her plastic surgeon. And so I'm turning the rest of the meeting over to Larry. Great presentation, Scott. Thank you for the information. Good project. Thank you all for everything that you do. And I'll see you next month. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. I concur with Brandy's. Thanks for taking this on. I want to kind of confirm that maybe you all protect the integrity of this corridor a little better than the previous people did. I have a map here showing the split grade interchanges that were supposed to be done between Woodman and Drennan. Mm-hmm. There are 14 of them. Now, of the 14, 4 of them were supposed to be split level flyovers. Mm-hmm. The rest of them were supposed to be interchanges. Mm-hmm. Now, the existing one, we have 2 interchanges, and none of the others exist. So I'm asking, if they ever do them, look at the additional cost it's going to have, because they've allowed commerce to build up on both sides to where if you put an interchange at, let's say, for example, Constitution, you have Safeway on one corner, you have Lowe's on another corner, you have a bank on another corner, and you have a Walgreens on another corner.
Yep.
How are you going to put an interchange and not cost everybody just a whole lot of money? So what I'm saying is that this map here shows exactly where these split grades are supposed to be. Are you going to be able to protect the integrity of your section to not get the same kind of crap that we have now?
I personally? No. However, that is the goal of having this being a public process with multiple agencies. It's really the agencies and development review that happens that needs to help make those, not allow the development that tight to the corridor, right? So that's what the goal is of this study, is laying out, this is what the corridor needs to be. Let's make sure we're all on the same page. These are where the access points are going to be. Let's make sure, you know, as develop occurs, we don't let that encroach to preclude or make it that much more difficult in the future to upgrade them.
Well, I just hope that it does, because they talk about the fact that we need an east-west.
Mhm.
Well, the best east-west is the north-south. And the thing of it is, if they didn't have all of these stoplights on Powers, the traffic flow would be far advanced where we have now.
Yeah,
And then we wouldn't be talking about an east-west.
no,
Thank you.
like that, I hear you.
All right, do we have any other questions from the group here? Do we have any questions online? I believe we had one individual that had some questions.
I do. How much would this cost?
The project as a whole, I think right now we had, I don't have the numbers right in front of me. It's somewhere between 800 million and $1 billion overall for the entire corridor build out.
Okay, and then how many businesses and people will have to be displaced?
I don't have all the numbers in front of me for
These
that.
seem like really important details when you're talking about a giant project that, from what you guys are speaking about, isn't even built up and is just a 30 to 40-year projection, which is just based on the idea that cars will continue to increase, that car use will continue to increase. And I also just wanted to know, how will you make sure that neighborhoods aren't fragmented, that people will be able to cross over, that this won't be cutting into neighborhoods?
Those are all really good questions. I know through the planning process, we've been going through and working with the developers that have their plans in place to make sure that they account for the corridor that goes through. We're also looking at some of the existing neighborhoods on the south end, that how we would be able to accommodate that and not bisect them.
Yeah, and also like making sure that if people are moved, they're being compensated and moved to appropriate places. Also making sure that this corridor, the way that these developers are planning, are they going to be supplementing not only paying for this extension, these two extensions, but also are they going to be paying to replace these roads in 20 to 25 years after they've been established?
That I don't have an answer to.
So they're not involved. So our county, so PPRTA is just footing the bill for their developments, but we don't necessarily have a tax base to pay for this.
I mean, I'll interject. I think I appreciate everything that you're saying, mostly because I am exactly where you are. I would love to have this done. I would love to not be having this conversation. Unfortunately, we are at the very beginning stages of this. So we're not going to have answers to all of the things that you're saying right now. But if history proves out, generally when these road construction projects go in, regardless of where they go in, unless they're private roads, they eventually get turned over to governmental entities, whether that is going to be paid for by PPRTA, PPACG, City of Colorado Springs, El Paso County. That's how the process works. That's how the process has worked my entire
Yeah,
career.
so what I'm saying is that what this does is it puts a huge debt in our pocket. And it doesn't, and we aren't requiring these developers to make sure that they're developing dense in enough density to make sure that there are schools, businesses, homes developed to be able to maintain this extension, because that's something that's frequently happened.
Right. And those are independent, mutually exclusive. This body is not going to tell El Paso County how to do their densities. It's not going to tell City of Fountain how to do their densities.
Yeah,
This
you
is
don't have to, but you do have to like consider how much money you're going to have to pay down the line.
Correct.
Well, let me.
Sorry.
Just
The
hang
intent
on
of this
just
is
a- whoa,
this is the
hang on
study.
just a second, Josh. Brandy, I'm on. Have you hold on for a second. Zuri, I'm going to have you on. We have 5 minutes allotted for you and your presentation. Just let me say something from my perspective too, and then I'm going to have Josh, who is the county engineer, address some of your items. Is that, as indicated in this presentation, this is a very first planning process. And as Brandy indicated, as I will indicate, some of the items that you brought up are so far down the road in the planning and development process that nobody really has any answers for. And so at this point, what I'd like to do is turn it over to Josh, the county engineer, to add some additional comments to this discussion.
So all of
Some
these,
comment-
all these questions and concerns are completely valid, and they were a priority when it came down to the decision-making process for this study. But this, like everybody said, this is the first step in a very lengthy process, and having a comprehensive study in our pocket will ensure that the appropriate parties who have a responsible stake in providing funding and building responsibly can be held accountable. It helps them plan, it helps the developers plan, it helps local agencies plan, it helps our transportation planning organizations plan for it. It helps them in identifying current funding and future funding. So I mean, having this, pardon the pun, this network of planning ideas is key to addressing some of these issues that you've mentioned for funding, for property acquisition, for responsible planning, for development. Not having a planning study could then burden the county or the city or the state with the responsibility of coming up with the funds for these types of projects. So the intent and one of the goals of this study is to make it possible to answer some of these questions, or at least lay the framework to answer a lot of these questions as we progress over the next 5, 10, 15, 20, 40 years.
Thank you, Josh. Does that answer some of your questions?
So it does. I mean, part of the problem is that when you're working with developers, they make their money right away. So they don't have any need to make sure that it is a long-standing, that it works for the county long-term. Also, nothing in here, all the projections in terms of congestion and need don't seem to consider transit in any way, at least from what I've heard. So that would be an important part of the study, as well as bike paths and walkability. I'll let you guys go. I know I'm tough, but I think these are really important things, and I think we've spent since the 1930s planning for cars and not dealing with the actual practicalities and ways that that type of planning puts us in debt and isolates people and ruins neighborhoods and ruins our environment. So I think it's really important that if you're going to put $1 billion on a project, that you have a way to pay for it, and that it's not just developers saying it'll probably be okay. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you for your comments. And I'd just like to add, as everyone has indicated, this is really a preliminary start to this project. And there's a lot of things as we go along, as far as the funding, development, design, as Josh indicated, as you indicated, there's a lot of things that are included in these projects as they go along. Yeah. And to answer one of Rick's comments concerning Powers Boulevard, time will tell. But when I went through a lot of the design meetings and that on Powers Boulevard between Constitution, between Platt and Woodman, and most of that, and that was a planning document that they had, and they actually had the developers set aside, and what they were looking at was, and of course this will possibly change, but they were looking at diamond interchanges instead of the full blown interchanges. And so it would not take up as much room. Now, whether all those businesses were set back as far as they should have been, I can't answer that question. But that was looked at as part of that design process, just like what we're doing on the South Powers design is that they've gone through and looked at some of those issues. And I expect your company and also the feds and the state and the city and Fountain, to look at all these issues. And that's another thing too, bike paths were brought up, things of that nature. Those are all included, in designs nowadays. 30 years ago, yeah, they were not thought of. And so, you put down a piece of asphalt and that was it. But now that is all included, as part of design, for these projects. And so it's not something that will be forgot about. It's part of the design standards. And we will just have to work with the developers, work with the consultants, work with the city, county, Fountain to come up with a project that is acceptable to, all the people that are going to be affected by this. Now, she brought up one question about, how many people are going to be in business is going to be dislocated. Really, until you get into the design, you really don't know. But let me just say this, is that there are federal rules in effect that those, if there is dislocations and relocations, there are set procedures that will have to be followed to compensate businesses or individuals if their businesses or homes have to be relocated. So that is already laid out in federal standards. And that is, since this has to be approved by the federal government, all those rules and regulations will be part of this project. And yes, it will probably be kind of a nightmare as we go through all these different items, but it will then present a very good final product for the people that are affected, for the people that are actually using the road, for those people that are looking at, like Carlos, if he wants to, take his bike all the way down to the Pikes Peak, down there, it will be available to where they can do that. It'll all be part of that design. So design of roads and that have drastically changed over the years. And they take these things into consideration now. It's like, for example, this is sort of a side item, but give you I brought up a meeting earlier where the county is redoing the intersection of Meridian and Rex Road. And with that particular project, they have to take into account ADA. They have to take into account bike lanes. They have to rebuild the sidewalks that were there, which is part of the transportation network. So all these items are part of the design process. And, that's what we will watch, as this project goes forward. Would you like to add any other comments?
No, you really nailed it. I mean, you're absolutely right. There's federal process for land acquisition, and we have to follow, especially when you're federalize a project. So it's a prescribed way so people do get fairly compensated if that happens. And we're early in the process, and that's why we have these corridor widths that we came up with and are recommending, is to allow for those additional elements that typically we wouldn't have within, years ago wouldn't have had, right? When you're building a freeway, you don't want pedestrians, you don't want all these other things adjacent to freeway. Well, now we're incorporating those into our designs, and that's what we're trying to do with this study. This is the width we need preserved to work with development that comes up to it, not necessarily right away, but a corridor width to allow for those elements to be included and incorporated, as well as transit. I mean, that's part of what we're putting in here as well.
Yes. Well, I need to see if we have any. I see Rick with one more comment.
Here's a quick follow-up on what you said. I wasn't part of the planning part of it, but I did know the the individual who was from Wilson Company that led the project at that time. And we spent quite a bit of time talking about it. And my biggest point is the fact that my mom always told me, says, once a job is first begun, do not stop until it's done. Once whether a task is large or small, do it well or not at all. I don't see that happening with the way they did Powers. Now, if they even put the interchanges in now, it's going to cost substantially more, and it has created a lot more traffic backup than it would have done if they had done it right to start with. That's my only point. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any other comments from the floor here? Do we have any additional comments from anyone online? Okay, at this particular time, then I'd entertain a motion for approval for the letter of support for the South Powers Extension PEL study as presented at this meeting.
Yes, I'd like to make a motion to that effect, that we recommend to the board to approve this study.
Ed?
Yep.
Made
And
the
this-
motion. Do I have a second? All right, and Rick Hoover seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Do we have anyone against? All right, not hearing any, that motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much for the presentation.
Thank you all. Appreciate it.
And just an additional comment, I think all the comments and discussion that we had relative to this item was a good discussion concerning this particular project, because I'm sure it will come forward, sometime in the future again. And we'll probably be looking at it again sometime in the future. All right, moving on. Monthly El Paso County monthly change order and property acquisition report. This is just an information item from Josh as county engineer. Do we have any questions for Josh on these items? Hearing none, moving on to the next item. Rick, report of recent board actions.
I've placed the highlights in a memo form in the packet. I'll take any questions you might have. Okay, thank you.
Next item is Rick again. This is concerning the issue that came up at last month's board meeting on whatever. Absent. Yeah, whatever. You know what I'm trying to say.
As the CAC recalls from the last monthly meeting, a question, there were several CAC members who abstained on an item, and a question was raised whether or not that was appropriate. First of all, the CAC bylaws approved by the board does indicate that the CAC shall use Robert's Rules of Order as its basis for governing the conduct of meetings on page 2 of the CAC bylaws. When I began my research, I found the paragraph that I highlighted and placed in the packet, indicating that although it's the duty of every member who has an opinion on a question to express it by his vote, he can abstain since he cannot be compelled to vote. So when I found that paragraph, I discontinued my research. I will stand corrected if there are any experts who know more about Robert's rules than I, which is easy to be more knowledgeable than I am. But I'm just sharing what I found, and I invite any other research that might be out there.
Carlos.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Carlos Perez, Colorado Springs CTAB. Yeah, have used Robert's rules, parliamentary procedure is a very complex area. So appreciate everything that you've done there. I went back and I reviewed our CAC bylaws, and it was, in this particular case, we did have the recusal of conflict of interest. We do have that in our bylaws. And maybe this is a question for, for everyone else, but we are really silent when it comes to majority, voting and with people who are recusals. And this could be excused recusals or recusals because of conflict of interest, or maybe someone decides, I don't want to participate. I want to abstain from the vote. And I'm just wondering out loud if maybe we should clarify that in our bylaws, particularly the case. And I wish Jim was here, because I was thinking, Jim, remember that one time he was concerned that we have a lot of engineers with engineering firms and there's a lot of recusals. He was concerned that we maybe fall below perhaps a quorum or, a vote or something. And in this case, the way Robert's Rules is written, the way we're interpreting it, that's not an issue. So if you have, I'm going to use this as an example. If you have 17 people on our body, and let's say 14 of them are engineers and they all have to recuse themselves, the remaining 3 could still vote and pass or turn down a vote. So in other words, you can have 2 and 1, and that would pass, and that would actually be an affirmative vote if you're using the majority of the people who are voting versus the majority of people who are present. Now, in our bylaws, we do have the case where the majority of the CAC present has to vote on changes to our bylaws, but that's all it says. It's just really bylaw changes. It doesn't really say anything about just general votes, business items that come before the CAC. So in here in our packet, where I'm leading to is we're looking at, do we want to just go ahead and say approve? Yeah, this is something, and memorialize it in our minutes, or should we go ahead and put this in our bylaws? I would feel more comfortable seeing this explicit, cleared up in our bylaws versus just, okay, we're using Robert's Rules, everything's okay, and this is a clarification item. This is listed as an approval item, and I think I don't know if it's information or if we need to put together a motion, but I would think, I would like to hear what everybody else says. We should go ahead and explain what abstentions mean as far as positive or negative approvals of items, business items before our body.
Well, I will let Rick expound some more on that then.
I have to at least temporarily disagree with that an abstention, that you could have 14 abstentions and then it could be a 2-to-1 vote. The research that I have in my notes, and I'd have to probably research it further for next month, says that on page 345 of my copy of Robert's Rules, that an abstention has the effect of a no vote. It's not a yes vote. So if you have 17 people, and if there's a motion to approve something and it has to pass by 9 votes, 9 positive votes, if you have 14 abstaining out of 17, then it doesn't pass. It couldn't pass by a 2-to-1. Now, I can research that further and come back to you next month. And maybe it's not appropriate to have research during the meeting.
This is, you guys can't hear me, but I actually have a cheat sheet, basically a summary of Robert's Rules of Order. And the question is, do abstention votes count? And it's an oxymoron. There's no such thing as abstention votes. You're just not there. So you would actually be majority present. That has to be in the bylaws. Otherwise, has no effect. And so it's the people who are voting. It's the majority of people voting. Would be the vote that would be in effect, for that particular motion. And it answers it in this question.
Well, excuse me, Carlos. I think Rick brought up a good point, is that possibly what we need to do is put this off until next month, and then let you and Rick, look into it some more and come back with an additional overview and recommendation as far as what we should do.
Mr. Chair,
Is that?
may I speak? This is Tony Joya.
Yes, Tony.
I think the question on Rick's side here is, if we're only 3 people are voting, for instance, do we have a quorum for the vote because we would need a majority of the committee at least voting in order to have a quorum. Is that not correct?
I would need to research that further. So let's add that to the research list for next month.
Okay, thank you.
Brandy.
I never actually, I took the city attorney's word for it, but when I was on city council, the instructions we were given is that we could not abstain. So much like Carlos mentioned in the beginning, is this body would create an overlay on top of Robert's Rules of Order as to how we want to govern ourselves, whether we do want to allow those abstentions or not. And I think that's probably the conversation on the table. Figure out what happens if you abstain, if you have a quorum, if we've gotten to the point we can still hold the meeting. But how do we want to hold ourselves accountable to sitting around this table? Do we want to have the option to have an abstention or not? And I think that's the conversation that needs to happen. And that information would then be placed in the bylaws that govern the CAC, not necessarily going back to Robert's Rules of Order. But if we don't want to, if we still want to allow the option, then I agree with Carlos. We should at least memorialize that so we don't have to keep, looking it up every third year. And I don't have an opinion either way. I'd love to hear the group's opinions.
Yeah, I was one of the ones that abstained that time, and I'm really sorry I did. And because of when I read the rules from Robert's Rules, it says it is your duty. And when I accepted this position on this board, I accepted the duty to do my job, not to bail out. And that's basically what abstaining is doing, is saying, I'm not going to do my duty to make a decision that you have put me here to do. And so that's the reason why I'm sorry I did the abstention, and I won't ever do it again. So that is just my thought. It is our duty as appointed people, the protection of our community, to make a decision and put it in the record. Thank you.
Rick, what would be the best way to
Postpone for further research for next month.
Okay, could I have a motion to?
That was my motion. Go ahead and postpone this item for discussion to the May meeting.
Do I have a second for that motion? Alan? All right, so we have a motion and a second. All in favor to postpone this item till next month, say aye.
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 Anyone against? No.
We don't want us to abstain for that, right?
Okay, hearing no no's, and we won't get into the other item. It passes unanimously that we will postpone this until next month, and Rick will bring back some additional information for us. All right. Rick is up again. Rescheduling the January 1st, 2025 CAC meeting.
As I brought up last month, the first Wednesday in January is the 1st, which is a holiday. So we don't have to decide this today, but I did show it as an approved item to give you the option of approving a rescheduling. Two of the options that occurred to me are to meet on Tuesday, the 31st, New Year's Eve day, in the afternoon of New Year's Eve, or Thursday, the 2nd. There are pros and cons to either one, open for discussion. Either is workable for staff. The downside of Thursday means that since the PPRTA board packet goes out the day after the CAC meeting, and normally that's Thursday after your first Wednesday meeting. If you choose the 2nd, then the board packet would go out on Friday, the 3rd of January. So open for discussion, don't have to decide today.
Do we have any discussion from anyone here in the room or anyone online? Ms. Brandy?
My preference would be Thursday because I have a feeling we might have a lot of people not show up on New Year's Eve because they're preparing for whatever it is their festivities are on New Year's Eve. So I would say if staff's comfortable with a Thursday meeting, I think our attendance numbers would be greater on that Thursday.
Okay, do we have any other comments? Ed?
Question is, virtual option still going to be available? And is this one that we might want to make mostly virtual?
What do you think, Rick?
It's up to the CAC members.
I was just thinking it might be easier to get a quorum if we did something to that effect.
Well, that's a possibility to just make the whole meeting virtual, and then we could have it on Tuesday, which would not be as much of an effect upon people. And then that would give staff, more time to get their packet ready for the board instead of having the meeting on Thursday. Yeah, so yeah, we can throw that one out, is just have that meeting virtual and have it on Tuesday, and then that way the staff would have Thursday to put their packet together for the board on the following Wednesday's meeting. What do you think about that idea, Rick?
Could you repeat that, please, Mr. Chair?
Okay. What Ed proposed was looking at the possibility of having that January meeting for the CAC completely virtual, so that and this sort of follows with what Brandy said. Probably would not have as much effect upon attendance if we did complete virtual. And then if we did that on Tuesday, then that would give you Thursday right after the first of the year to get your packet ready for the CAC, not the CAC, but the PPRTA board on the following Wednesday.
Certainly acceptable to staff. I think it's totally up to the CAC how you want to handle it.
Yes, Carlos?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, I really appreciate the staff being available to put together, the packet that last week of the year. Personally, I'm not comfortable asking staff to be available between Christmas and New Year's. Typically, a lot of people take vacation time, including the people who are preparing the packet, such as Colorado Springs, El Paso County, all the member governments submitting everything. I'm with Brandy on this one. I would prefer that we would go later rather than earlier, just to give, just so we can accommodate holiday time for staff, not just PPRTA staff, but member government staff. I could support either one, but I'm just not comfortable with the 31st.
Okay, do we have any other comments? Well, what I would like to propose is that we postpone this to next month's meeting, and that we have further discussion on what the best way to approach this at the end of the year meeting that we need to accomplish. We've thrown out several different options, and so everybody can think about it, and then we can have some further discussion next month. Like Rick says, we don't need to make a decision right away, but at least we've got the discussion going on how the best way to handle it is. Do I have a motion to postpone this till next month? Ed, do I have a second? And I've got two. So we've got a motion to postpone the scheduling for January the 1st. Of course, that's another option. We could have the meeting on January the 1st. What do you think about that one, Rick? I don't think that went over with Rick too well from the look on his face.
I think the CAC members would be watching too many football games to even attend virtually.
And I would have to agree, because I'd be one of those watching the football games. So, but anyway, we have a a motion to postpone this item until next month? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone against?
Aye.
Hearing none, that passes unanimously. So we will discuss it again next month. So next item. City of Fountain requests to join the PPRTA. Some of you were not on the board last year. And so what I'll do is, and this will probably be a duplicate for some of the people that were on the board last year. Fountain requested to join PPRTA last year, and we went through the process, and the CAC board approved their request after the attorney for the PPRTA came up with an agreement. It was signed off by all the relative entities that are contained within PPRTA at this time. And it would require some reallocation of the amount of funds going to the different entities, but all those entities were in agreement with what the attorney had come up with as far as recommendations on that. The Fountain, went to the election in November of last year. It was defeated. I believe it was somewhere in a range of about 54% against and 46% for, as a rough number of what happened. The mayor and the Fountain City Council have decided that they want to come forward again and ask to rejoin PPRTA, and they would have to do an election in November again. The attorney has Jennifer Ivy. I should put her name in there instead of just saying attorney. Jennifer Ivy has basically taken the same agreement that was developed last year, reviewed it. She did not see any major changes to that. And so that's what they're proposing. The entities within PPRTA so far have not had any objections. And so what we're looking at here is a recommendation to the board that we proceed forward with PPRTA request from Fountain to have another election this year to see whether they're willing to justify or willing to approve the addition of Fountain to the PPRTA board and CAG. And all those items, like I say, were worked out last year when we first had this vote by Jennifer Ivy, when she did a lot of the documents and everything that had to be taken care of. At that time, there were no objections from any of the city entities that were and the county that were in the CAC and the board at this time. So with that, what I'd like to do is have Rick see if you have any additional comments to add on to what I've sort of given a general overview of what we're looking at here.
You've done an excellent job, but I have a few to add. The attorney has a timetable that was slightly revised from last year. And the very first step is that a prospective new member government governing body needs to come forward to our board and state that they do want to begin the process to attempt to join. And that's via a resolution. And in this case, the Fountain City Council has approved a resolution on March 26th, and that's in your packet, stating that they do want to tip over the first domino of the series of steps between now and November, when excuse me, when they would go to their voters to ask their voters again to approve. So they've approved their resolution. The second step is the PPRTA board needs to pass a resolution receiving Fountain City Council resolution, and the PPRTA board's resolution states that the board is favorable to Fountain joining and will cooperate with Fountain in the process between April and November. So that's the resolution that's also in your packet, and that was sent out in the supplemental packet that was added to your original packet. So it's before the CAC to discuss and also hear any presentation. The Fountain City Mayor Sharon Thompson is here, and Mr. Chair, please invite her to speak. But what's before the CAC today is, do you want to recommend favorably or not to the board that they approve the resolution that supports and agrees to cooperate with Fountain in their process that begins now and would end with the ballot in November. So that's what's before you. And Mr. Chair, if you want to invite Mayor Thompson to speak, if she'd care to.
Yes, Mayor Thompson, would you like to approach the podium and address us on this subject?
Hi, thank you so much. And this is actually a great day to be here to listen in on the Power South Corridor Extension. Brandon, I've had a lot of conversations with that over the years. So thank you for listening to us today. Yeah, we took it to the ballot last year, obviously disappointed. It didn't pass. We had a tough time with it, and we just would like to approach our voters with it again. We know we're losing a substantial amount of money to, in our opinion, losing, right? You guys are gaining with properties that are in that. And as we annex different properties into the city, most of them potentially are members of RTA. And so we just feel like that gap would continue to grow. We, like everyone, are looking for a long-term funding source for roads and infrastructure within our city. And we just feel PPRTA is a huge part of that process in getting that potential long-range streaming fund from that. So we would appreciate you moving forward with us looking at possibly placing it on the ballot. Obviously, we can't make a decision yet because that puts the city in a position of having to put pencils down a little bit sooner than we might want to. And so it is potentially putting it on the ballot at this point, so that we have not had a formal vote on it, but we understand your process and are beginning to work through that. So do you have any questions for me?
Any questions for the Mayor of Fountain? Carlos?
This meeting is I have a lot of questions. My name is Carlos Perez.
No, you only get one question.
One question. Make a good one.
We're at 3:14.
This is a question I've asked before. It wasn't just with Fountain, but also Monument has been, contemplating maybe joining the PPRTA, and it's always come up. And so it's the same question I've asked people from Fountain. What has changed where you think this ballot measure is going to be passed this time, whereas previously it did not? What's different? That's a question for you.
No, I appreciate that. Thank you very much. We thought we did a fantastic job last time of educating our citizens on it. Obviously, I think we fell short on that. I get people want to say this is not the right time for the tax, right? But our roads are deteriorating like everywhere else. And we just really hope to stress that a little bit more with people, that there is no funding source. We've had multiple people call since, like, even as soon as the day after the ballot measure passed, when are you going to fix my road? When are you going to fix that road? And we were like, well, we don't have any additional funds for it. So we're hoping to push that part. We're also working to form a more active citizens group, getting more citizens involved with this. Hopefully we'll be meeting in the next week or two and making a decision with the citizens if they're ready to commit to this, and just get more citizen involvement with it and more education going. If they say no again, then they say no again, but we're hoping they'll say yes when they really, really look at the conditions of their roads and really come to the budget meetings and understand what we can and can't afford. And I'm hoping we'll have a little bit more aggressive campaign this time around. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it is. The conditions have changed. There's more pain now. by the citizens and they'd be more open to this. That was my question.
Well-
More pain. We have more pain now. That's,
Okay.
that's the answer to the question. That's what's changed.
Pretty much, yeah. Yes, ma'am. Oh,
You don't mind. I reflect on our extensive orientation meeting for Kathy and I with Rick. We went, I don't know if the rest of you were involved in voluminous orientation with Rick. But what I want to be refreshed on, and you alluded to a reallocation of sharing of funds. But I would recall that it also affected the vote amongst members in a certain regard. Is that correct? Representation and vote. And I wanted to have that re-clarified, please.
Yeah, and there is a little bit of reallocation in voting, and possibly Rick can get into that a little bit more.
Yes, the, when Calhan expressed an interest in joining, the board decided that they wanted to amend the establishing IGA such that the smaller entities, current and future, would have to share 3 votes, such that the city of Colorado Springs would have 3 votes, El Paso County would have 3 votes, and all other members would have to share 3 votes. So that's what the board advocated to all 6 member governments. The others agreed. So currently, since we have 4 smaller entities sharing 3 votes, that on the board of directors, that's 0.75 of a vote for each of the, for Manitou Springs, Calhan, Raymond, and Green Mountain Falls. The establishing IGA that was amended also said if there were other members added that let's just say Fountain came in or Monument came in, then the smaller entities would go from 4 to 5. So then 5 smaller entities would be sharing 3 votes. So that means that on the board of directors, the smaller entity directors would have a 0.6 vote instead of the current 0.75 vote. Does that answer the question?
Yes. I think that enters into consideration as the group grows, that we need to be thinking about is how it affects our representation.
And that was made clear to at least the Fountain City staff, if not the mayor.
Great. No, we were aware of
yes.
it.
Okay.
And we looked at it as a great chance to collaborate with some people, Calhan and Rama, that we may not necessarily collaborate with on a lot of things, and potentially make the board stronger through that collaboration.
Do we have any more questions for the mayor? All right, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Do we have any additional questions or comments from the board or anyone online? Yes.
Just a clarification for the board approval. It has to be unanimous. Is that correct?
For each of the 6 member government boards or
Yes.
for the PPRTA board?
For the PPRTA board.
Let me reflect on that. If I could have a 3-minute recess, let me look at the establishing IGA. The vote of the 6 member government governing bodies, that has to be all 6, and by a minimum 2/3 of each of every one of the 6. And that's 2/3 regardless of attendance. So for example, Board of County Commissioners, that would have to be an absolute 4, because 3 out of 5 is not 2/3. And so it'd have to be 4 regardless of attendance. So either I can, either we have a 3 or 4 minute recess, or I can send out an email afterwards.
I think you clarified you answered my question, I
Okay.
think.
Are we going to call, are you going to call recess? Because my recollection is that to add new members required a unanimous vote of all the other members, has to be unanimous versus other items. And that was in the IGA. So but that was my recollection. So I would like to just confirm if that's correct or not, because I believe I thought it was unanimous. It
Yes.
could be wrong though. And I would like to just, maybe we get an answer just quickly in the
yeah,
IGA.
That's
Or wait,
relative to the board, as I understand it right now, the CAC does not have to be unanimous.
Oh, I misunderstood the question. I thought you were
Yeah.
referring to the board's vote, not our CAC
Yes,
vote.
I was.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I
So
did
the
didn't misunderstand.
So what we're talking two different things, the
Right.
CAC, we don't need a unanimous, but the board, the PPRTA board, which meets next week, has to be unanimous in the approval.
That's what I'm unsure of. And if I could have a 3 minute recess, I'd like to research that.
Why don't we do that just to answer that question then, Rick? While he's looking that up, I am going to skip down to item number 10, communications. Yes.
So I just want to note for everybody, construction never stops, but we're getting to prime construction season right now. And National Work Zone Awareness Week is coming up this month. It is actually scheduled for the week of April 15th through the 19th. This year's theme is work zones are temporary. Actions behind the wheel can last forever. So I just want to remind everybody, and if you would, as you're speaking to the public too, just making sure that, they be aware of the work zone speed limits and to pay attention to what they're doing in those work zones as well as everywhere else. So I just wanted to make that comment.
And that's a good point. And observe the speed limit going through the construction zones. I had Josh is gone right now. I had some guy, I was on Meridian Road heading up into the construction zone and hadn't got quite to it, but we had gone past the 35-mile-an-hour speed limit. And I was down to 35. I swear that guy must have been doing between 50 and 60 miles an hour when he passed me before he really got into the active construction zone. So yes, it's very important that those people, all people observe the construction zone. The other item that I wanted to bring up under communications, in fact, as soon as we get done with this meeting, I'm going to another meeting. CDOT is having an open house in Falcon at the Falcon Elementary School of Technology on Falcon Highway. And what this is the presentation of their next phase of rebuilding Highway 24 between Garrett and Woodman Road. Right now, Highway 24 is 4 lanes all the way up to Garrett Road, and then it goes down to 2 lanes. And that's gotten kind of interesting because of the amount of traffic in that. And so this is the first meeting of CDOT to give the presentation of what they're looking at on this particular project. And this meeting is between 5 and 6:30 p.m. Like I say, at the Falcon Elementary School of Technology. And so like I say, I'm going to be going to this meeting. Ed's going to go to the meeting. Josh is going to be there. Quite a few of the county people are also going to be there too. So this is just sort of an information thing to let you know that there are other projects that are going on, within the area, along with the South Powers Boulevard presentation that we had, and then also this presentation from CDOT on approving a project on Highway 24. Yes, Rick?
Okay, the results of my research. Number 1, the vote by the Fountain City Council to request to join needs to be by a majority vote. which it was on March 26th. The vote by the PPRTA board is by a majority. Sorry. No, the vote by the PPRTA board is by 2/3. The board doesn't have to be unanimous to vote for fountain joining. The votes by the 6 member governments governing bodies, it has to be unanimous. It has to be all 6, but each of the 6 can be by majority, not 2/3, as I previously said. The 2/3 is needed when you're revising the establishing IGA. So majority for fountain, 2/3 by the PPRTA board, and majority by each and every one of the 6 member government governing bodies.
Rick, fountain's unanimous, right? Fountain has to be unanimous.
4-2.
Okay.
Okay, does that clarify everybody's questions as far as how we go, how it proceeds from here? Do we have any other additional questions or comments? Can I get a proposal to approve this item for City of Fountain's request to join the PPRTA?
I move we recommend approval of Fountain's request.
All right, thank you. Do I have a second? Ed, second. All in favor? Say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Not hearing any, that motion passes unanimously. This will go to the PPRTA board next week. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct, Mr. Chair.
So they will also be voting on this item next week at their board meeting. All right. Do we have any agenda topics for next meeting? Other than the one that we discussed on what Rick is going to do some further investigation and then come back to us. Any other items for next month's meeting? Okay, hearing none. We just went through communications, so the next thing is adjournment. I move for approval for adjournment. All in favor? Anyone opposed? All right, that's unanimous on adjournment. All right, thank you, everyone.